Saturday, September 5th. And so we are continuing now with the examination of the section on the unwholesome, the groups of mental defilements. Okay, the next set we come to with section 8 are called the hindrances, the nivarana. And so first we look at the text, and the text says there are 6 hindrances. These are the hindrances of sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, or I would now prefer to translate dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and worry, though I would prefer to translate, instead of worry, I would have remorse or regret, the hindrance of doubt, and the hindrance of ignorance. And so here we have a number of unwholesome mental states grouped together under this name or designation hindrances because they block the way. They block the path of, say, spiritual development, of mental development. They block the way to liberation, to nibbana. And now if, probably many of you have been reading the suttas, the discourses, and when we read the discourses, we come across again and again 5 hindrances. So whenever the Buddha is speaking about the gradual or sequential path of practice, he speaks about how the disciple at a certain stage overcomes the 5 hindrances, the first 5 hindrances mentioned here, and then goes on to attain the first jhana, second, third, fourth jhana. So why does this text speak about 6 hindrances? It seems, maybe superficially, it seems a little confusing. And the reason is because there are a number of suttas which speak about ignorance as a hindrance. For example, the suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya dealing with the beginningless nature of samsara say that this samsara, the round of rebirths, is without a discoverable beginning. The first point cannot be seen, or is not seen, of living beings who are hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. And so here we have ignorance described as a hindrance. Another sutta speaks about the reason for renewed existence, and it says for living beings who are hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, consciousness will be established in one state or another, and then a renewal of existence will take place. And so on the basis of such sutta passages, in collecting the hindrances, the Abhidhamma includes ignorance amongst the hindrances. And in that way we get 6 hindrances. And then looking at the definitions of them, I didn't put the definition for the hindrance of sensual desire because it's the same as the definition for clinging to sensual desire, the asava of sensual desire. Then we have the hindrance of ill will. Again, I didn't put that because we already had the bodily knot of ill will. And you see, this is the interesting thing about the Abhidhamma, the first book of the Abhidhamma. It takes all of these terms from the suttas, and then it uses pretty much the same formula to describe terms which are in essence identical, even though the suttas might use different expressions for them. So in that way, we can see that these different terms in the suttas are actually designating the same mental factor, just classifying it in different ways. But what's new here is the hindrance of, in Pali, tina mida, sloth and torpor, dullness or drowsiness. So this is the definition. Actually, I'm not so happy with it. So what is dullness? So that which is, call it unsuitability of the mind, unwieldiness of the mind, the sinking of the mind, the sluggishness of the mind, and so on. This is called dullness. And then it says, what is mida, drowsiness? So it says that which is the unsuitability of the body. But the commentary explains what's meant by the body here would be the body or the group of mental factors associated with the citta, not the physical body. So this is, again, unwieldiness, sleepiness, again, various words, drowsiness, and so on. So this is called drowsiness. So we take this dullness and this drowsiness together, and they are called the hindrance of dullness and drowsiness. So under this one hindrance, we actually have two mental qualities which are very similar in that they both involve what I would call a sinking of the mind. The way I understand the difference, and I have a lot of personal experience with this, the difference between dullness and drowsiness is that dullness I compare to a day when, after it's been a bright sunny day, and then sort of the next day, the sky becomes gray and everything looks gray, sort of dull. So that is the dullness of the mind. And you try to fix the mind on the object, and the mind just doesn't want to go to the object. And even with a lot of effort, it just is unflexible, unwieldy. And then the drowsiness, this is not natural sleepiness that comes, 10 o'clock at night, 10:30, when you start to get sleepy. But this is, you've had a good night's sleep, and you sit down for your meditation in the morning full of vigor and energy. I see this sometimes when I look out at groups sitting in meditation. And somebody is almost inevitably sitting there. So this is the quality when, suddenly the mind gets sleepy, not through the natural bodily process of sleepiness, but just because, it can't fix on the object, and so this kind of sleepiness sets in. So the way I see the relationship between tina mida, that the dullness comes first, that the mind just becomes unwieldy, unflexible, inflexible, unadaptable, without energy and vigor. And then because of that, then the drowsiness sets in. Anyway, that's my experience of their relationship. Okay, so because even though they're different mental factors, but because they both have this common characteristic of what I call the sinking of the mind, the sort of drooping of the mind, that the Buddha has joined them together as one hindrance. Then the next hindrance, which brings in something new, is called in Pali Uddhacca Kukucca, which is translated here as restlessness and worry. And I don't actually think the rendering of worry is quite correct, because worry signifies concern about the future. Oh, this might happen to me, that might happen to me. And I think that belongs with restlessness. But kukucca, literally, it's kukritya. Having done something wrong, one then has remorse, guilt, regrets over it, and the mind becomes fixated upon that wrongdoing. And so the mind is unable to settle down because it's constantly rehearsing, reviewing the past wrongdoing. And so we could see restlessness and remorse are joined together, though they're different mental functions, different mental factors, but they're joined together because they have this common characteristic of causing the mind to be unsettled, to be agitated. And then the Abhidhamma text defines them. Okay, for what is uddhacca, restlessness? That which is restlessness of the mind, the unpeacefulness of the mind, the distraction of the mind, the wandering of the mind. This is called restlessness. Then what is kukucca? What I would render remorse or regret. It uses because it's monks who are writing these texts, so it uses a very monastic definition. That is I won't go into an explanation of it, but I'll just give a concise statement that it's one perceives something not allowable as allowable, one perceives something allowable as not allowable. This maybe is more general. One perceives as a fault something that is not a fault, and one perceives as faultless what is a fault. Any kind of regret, regretfulness, remorse of the mind, mental scratching, a very good term, a kind of scratching on the mind. This is called remorse. So the basic idea here is that one, in a general way, one has done something that one thinks is wrong, and the mind constantly dwells on it and goes back to it. And because of that, the mind doesn't settle down. Of course, if one has done something wrong, it's good to recognize I've done something wrong and to feel a kind of remorse or compunction of it. But then one moves the mind on one looks forward, not backwards. But it's not advocated as government policy. But this is for mental training. One recognizes the wrong, makes amends for it in any way possible, makes the determination, I won't do that in the future, but I will do what is good and wholesome, and then brings the mind back to the present. So this is restlessness and remorse. And then the fifth hindrance is the hindrance of doubt, which here, as I said, this is not what I would call inquisitive doubt or investigative doubt, But this is the kind of skeptical doubt that arises particularly when one is in training, engaged in the practice, and then what happens, the way the text explains it, that one doubts and suspects the teacher. And the teacher here means the Buddha. You doubt me, perfectly okay. But Sattari means the sort of the founder of the teaching, the Buddha. One doubts and suspects the Dhamma. One doubts and suspects the Sangha. This is the noble Sangha. One doubts and suspects the training. Then one doubts and suspects different aspects of the doctrine, particularly dependent origination. So any kind of doubt, suspicion, perplexity, dividedness of the mind. There are many words for this in Pali. In English, we just have 2 or 3 words that indicate doubt. Again, scratching of the mind. So this is what is called the hindrance of doubt. Then the hindrance of ignorance. Again, we have basically not understanding the Four Noble Truths, not understanding the past and the future, not understanding dependent origination. Okay, so those are the 6 hindrances. Again, we have the 5 hindrances from the future, the 5 hindrances from the sutta scheme, and then the 6th hindrance included as part of the Abhidhamma system. Okay, the next group that we have are called the 7 anusaya. These are translated latent. Here we have latent dispositions. Some use latent tendencies, underlying tendencies. The word anusaya is from saya, which means to lie down, lying down, plus the prefix anu, along with. So that which lies deep within the mind and flows along with the mind. And so these are certain deeply rooted, firmly rooted, unwholesome tendencies which are repeatedly cropping up and becoming active in the mind. But as long as we continue within the stream of existence, these latent tendencies are always lying dormant deep within the foundation of the mind. And so what are the 7 latent tendencies or latent dispositions? The latent disposition to sensual lust or sensual desire, the latent tendency of attachment to existence, craving for existence, the latent tendency of aversion, the latent tendency to conceit, the latent tendency to views, the latent tendency to doubt, the latent tendency to ignorance. Okay, what is new here? Okay, we could identify sensual lust, we've already had under other names. Attachment to existence, we've already had under other names. Aversion, patigha, is another word for what is the mental factor here? Yeah, it's another term for hatred. Patigha is aversion, turning against. Then what is new amongst the latent tendencies is mana, which means conceit. And the texts speak about different types of conceit. So there's three basic types. Here we have the conceit, I am better. You see, in English, when we speak about somebody as being conceited, we think that means he thinks he's better than everybody else. But in Buddhism, conceit takes on three manifestations. There is the conceit, I am better, I'm the best. But there's also the conceit, I am the same, I'm just as good as they are. Of course, one needs some self-confidence, that's a wholesome quality, but this kind of bolstering or boosting of oneself. Then the third type of conceit is called the conceit, I am inferior. Everything I do goes astray. I can't succeed in anything. Everybody else is better than me. Oh, poor me, I'm such a dismal failure. Oh, I'm really hopeless and worthless. That's a form of conceit. So the Buddha speaks of this conceit, conceiving, conceitedness, exaltation, self-exaltation, flying the banner of I'm the best, or putting oneself forward, desire for respect or admiration from others. All of this is called conceit. Okay, so this takes us through the latent tendencies. We have these 7 latent tendencies. So we have sensual lust, attachment to existence, are modes of the defilement, the unwholesome factor of greed. Aversion, as we said, a manifestation of hatred. Conceit is itself a separate mental factor. Wrong view, doubt are separate mental factors, and ignorance is just another term for delusion. So you could see how we have these many different groups of defilements, but there's a fixed, limited number of mental factors which are just appearing in different forms, under different names, with different aspects being emphasized. Okay, then we come to 10 fetters. These are called sangyojana in Pali. Sangyojana, again the word yojana, it's related to the word yoke. So it's things that bind one down, that tie one down. So we use the English translation, fetters. I think this comes from the 19th century British translators of Buddhist texts, and everybody else has adopted it. But there's a little surprise here that we'll see. Okay, in the suttas we come across 10 fetters again and again. So we have here the 10 fetters according to the sutta method are sensual lust, that's kamaraga, then attachment to fine material existence, to existence in the fine material or fine material realm, the divine realms. Attachment to immaterial existence, the desire to be reborn in the formless or immaterial realms of existence. Then the fetter of aversion, the fetter of conceit, the fetter of views, the fetter of adherence to rites and ceremonies or to behavior and observances, the fetter of doubt, the fetter of restlessness, the fetter of ignorance. Here the text has changed the usual order of the fetters. Usually the fetters are presented in the order in which they are to be eliminated. So, taking them in the normal order of the suttas, we have the first is, how is it translated here? Would be the fetter of views, which is actually in the sutta comes Sakkaya Ditthi, the fetter of the view of a self. Then we come to the fetter of doubt, the fetter of attachment, adherence to rites and ceremonies, because those are the three fetters to be eliminated first by the attainment of the first stage of enlightenment. Then the next two fetters are the fetters of sensual desire, or here sensual lust, and aversion, or ill will, because those are the fetters to be eliminated at the third stage of enlightenment. The second stage doesn't eliminate any fetters, it just weakens them. And then the last five fetters are the fetter of attachment to fine material existence, attachment to immaterial existence, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. And those five fetters, those last five fetters, are eliminated by the fourth and final stage of enlightenment. I don't know why the Abhidhamma Sangha has changed the order. There was some reason that I don't remember what it is. Okay, so these are the 10 fetters of the suttas, but now the Abhidhamma texts introduce 10 other fetters, which partly correspond, but there are some differences. So this is what we come across in section 11. So these are the 10 fetters of the specific Abhidhamma method. So these are the fetters of sensual lust, attachment to existence, aversion, conceit, wrong views, adherence to rites and ceremonies, doubt. Okay, those we've all come across. Then two new ones. Envy, avarice, which I prefer to translate miserliness, and ignorance. And so what is new here is envy, which means, if we look at the canonical definition, envy is envying the gain, honor, respect, esteem, veneration, and offerings of others. Again, I would call this a monastic definition, but we could give it a much broader understanding. When anybody has any kind of good fortune, success, good qualities, achievements, instead of rejoicing in their achievements and feeling empathy with them, one feels some kind of resentment against their success or good qualities. And this is envy. Then its counterpart is macharya, which means miserliness. Macharya, miser. In fact, there could be, it just occurred to me, there could be a etymological connection between the two words, macharya, miserly. Of course, both Pali and English have far back are linguistic cousins. And so the way miserliness is defined, again, this is coming from a monastic perspective, but first let's look at it and then see how to extend it more wisely. So it's miserliness in regard to dwelling places. So this is like sometimes like a monk gets a monastery, then he wants only his friends to stay there. He doesn't want other monks to stay there. Or he wants it for himself. No other monks can stay. It's my monastery. Get out. Don't come in. Then miserliness regarding families. Again, this comes from the monastic perspective. These would be like families of supporters. So I have these lay supporters and other monks come. I don't introduce my supporters to them because I'm afraid, if my supporters like this monk, they'll start to support him as well. And then my gains will go down. Then miserliness regarding gains. So I get, a lot of offerings. They have robes. I mean, I've seen this in monasteries. They store them in the closet till the closet is filled with robes. Other monks say, "Can you spare a robe?" I've seen some monks do this, and they'll take an old, used robe that's been kept in storage and give it as a gift while his storeroom is filled with bright new robes. Or one gets a lot of other offerings and keeps them and stores them up and doesn't want to share them with others. Miserliness regarding praise, like others do good things, but one doesn't want to praise them because one wants all praise for oneself. And then this is miserliness regarding the Dhamma, that one learns a lot of the Dhamma, the teaching, but one doesn't want to share one's knowledge with others, thinking I'll keep these teachings for myself, and maybe I can give them in discourses to lay people, but I don't want to teach them to other monks because then they'll start teaching, and then they'll get, esteem and honor, and then I'll lose my fame and honor. So this is from a monastic perspective, but we could say miserliness can apply to any kind of benefits that one has oneself and doesn't want to share with others. Money, wealth one has. Some people, this country, it's very conspicuous. These multimillionaires and billionaires, but maybe they'll give a little bit in charity just to get some name and honor, but they don't really like any kind of policies that will involve distribution of wealth so that other people can enjoy more prosperity. So it's wealth, fame, honors, any kind of benefits that one doesn't want to share with others. That kind of attitude of holding to one's own benefits and not sharing with others. This is miserliness. Okay, so these are the 10 fetters according to the Abhidhamma method. And then, of course, at the end, the fetter of ignorance. Now, somebody might have the question, why does the Abhidhamma come up with a set of 10 new fetters rather than the sutta method? It's a good question, and I looked over a couple of days ago, I was looking through as I'm preparing, looking through the commentaries to find, is there an explanation for that? I couldn't find an explanation. I don't know why. But that's what the texts say. Okay, now we come to the what are called the 10 kilesas. These are the 10 defilements. And what's interesting is that the word kilesa itself as a category for a specific group of defilements, we don't find this in the suttas. This is something distinctive of the Abhidhamma. In the suttas, we find many unwholesome mental states, which we call defilements. And the suttas use the form upakilesa. We call this corruptions of the mind, and sankilesa. But they don't have a group of 10 defilements, a fixed group. But this is what we find in the Abhidhamma. So we have here the 10 defilements, and the word defilement, kilesa, it has two implications. One implication is that which stains the mind. So that's why we use the word defilement. The other implication is that which troubles the mind or afflicts the mind. So that's why some translators use the expression afflictions, the mental afflictions. So the Chinese have fan now, right? Yeah, so fan now emphasizes the aspect of affliction. Fan is like trouble, now is like annoyance. Okay, so these 10 defilements, we have greed, hatred, delusion. So those are the 3 unwholesome roots. Then conceit and views. Then doubt. Then sloth or dullness. Restlessness. Then what is translated as shamelessness, or what I would also explain as lack of self-respect, and fearlessness of wrongdoing, or lack of moral dread. And the difference, let me explain the difference between the sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing. The sense of shame is that quality of mind that restrains one from doing wrong, from what I would call a sense of one's own dignity. Like, I should not steal or tell lies or slander others or do anything that's wrong, because that would sort of reduce my sense of inner worth. It would be a departure from my own inner standards of what's right and what is wrong. Whereas fear of wrongdoing is the quality of mind that restrains one from doing what is wrong, from fear that one will be criticized by others, blamed by others, or that one will do unwholesome, that one will create unwholesome karma that will bring suffering in the future. So it's fear of the consequences of doing wrong. Whereas the other is restraint based on the sense of preserving one's inner dignity. So one who lacks that sense of inner dignity and has no fear of criticism from others, that is one who has shamelessness and no fear of wrongdoing. Okay, maybe at this point I'll ask whether there's any questions. We still have one section to go, so Dina and Sarah? Okay. Dina and Sarah. You take the microphone, please.
Oh,
wow, your voice is so loud, I thought you had the microphone.
I am loud. My question has to do with doubt and
Yeah.
wrong view.
Yeah.
Is doubt only doubt of the Buddha's teaching? And just to put it all in one place, and if you don't doubt, then, and you have a wrong view, how will you ever question your view to change it? I don't understand why they're in the same place.
Let's take the first question.
Okay. Is doubt only of the
Okay.
Buddha's teaching?
I think we have to see even what the sutta teaching is doing and what the Abhidhamma is doing. It's not, as I see it, trying to give a comprehensive overview of every aspect of experience, but it's sort of organizing aspects of experience with regard to the practice of the Buddha's teaching. So in that case, doubt here is doubt, it's sort of the doubt for one who is either engaged with the practice of the Buddha's teaching or who is approaching the Buddha's teaching and then doubts it. And so that doubt then becomes an obstacle to their progress. So that is why doubt is included in these groups. Then the second question you had?
Well, I would just wondered, if you don't doubt, then how can you change your view if you have wrong view?
Okay, that's a good question. And I would say that kind of doubt is what I would call inquisitive doubt or investigative doubt. That isn't the doubt which is intended by the word doubt here.
Thank you.
That is what I call the skeptical doubt, the doubt which obstructs one's progress. But what you're speaking of is investigation or an inquiry into one's views. Even one can apply that kind of investigative doubt to the Buddha's teaching itself. The Buddha himself encourages, he says, you should investigate my teaching, examine it. In that case, that kind of doubt would be healthy.
Thank you.
Okay. Sarah, there are two microphones, okay.
Okay, so this is actually, these are some really interesting, like the words that are being used, like taint and floods and hindrances. Yeah. And recently I heard a talk and I heard hindrance described as originating from a word related to veil. I don't know if that's a veil.
Actually, varana, free. There's some connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I guess my question is, what is being veiled? Is this indicative of some sort of true, I mean, is this really, the true nature of the mind that's being veiled, or tainted, which is another great sort of word that you've described that makes a little bit more sense to me now. Like it's
okay. I said that the word nivarana could have some connection with the word meaning veil, but as it's actually used, the more direct meaning is blockage.
It's a blockage.
Yeah, that's why it's rendered hindrance, that which blocks one from progressing.
Okay. But then in terms of a taint, for example, would that be something that would be sort of tainting, that would have sort of the same maybe meaning as like a veil? It's adding something to something that's already there that's in
as I explained earlier, taint is like an English rendering for the word asava. But the word asava itself has really nothing to do even with taint, literally with taint, but it's what flows in.
Flows in.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. One question. Then I'm going to have to take you hold your question, Richard, because I'm going to have to go on to the last section. Otherwise, we don't have lunch today.
Bhante, this question is with regards to conceit.
Yeah.
You mentioned three types, basically having that superiority complex, inferiority, or having the comparing as the same.
Yeah.
So are we saying that conceit means no comparison at all and just letting it be as is, something
You mean
like that?
having no comparison?
Yeah. Is that what it means?
of course one can compare oneself with others, but not with the attitude of ranking oneself superior, equal, or inferior to others. I don't know, that would take exploration. Can your question be, is it a simple question?
I think so.
Okay.
I just notice when I compare the list of defilements to the unwholesome and universals and the unwholesome occasionals on 79, that all 10 of them are there and that 4 are missing. And what I'm wondering is why the 4 that are missing aren't also defilements: envy, avarice, worry, and torpor. Unwholesome occasionals, 22, 23, 24,
Envy
and
is there. You said that it's missing.
Yeah. It's not in the list of defilements on 269.
Oh, I see.
You see?
Yeah, what the reason?
Yeah.
This, I don't know. But it's, all of those unwholesome factors do enter into the various categories of defiled states. Why it's not in that specific list?
Yeah, well, it seemed to be the most inclusive list, or the one that followed the unwholesome universals and occasionals most completely.
Yeah.
I've noticed that envy and avarice are in the previous list of fetters.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't follow the list as completely. I was wondering why there isn't.
My
It
guess
seemed to almost match.
My guess is that the organizers of the list, the arrangers of the list, were working with convenient set of 10. And so they wanted to draw the limit at 10. Okay, let us now take the section called clarification. I think we've already covered through the explanations. Now taking what is called the summary. And I believe this is illustrated on the chart on page 270. Okay, by way of entity, this is by way of specific factors, the taints, floods, bonds, and knots are threefold. We're going to see these on the table. There are 2 types of clinging, 8 hindrances, 6 dispositions, 9 fetters, 10 defilements. Thus the compendium of evil or the unwholesome is 9-fold. Okay, this we can all see on the table. If we look at the table, okay, if you look at the mental factor greed, you see it comes under the taints, floods. Wow, it comes under all 9. It's always present. Floods, bonds, knots, clinging, hindrances, dispositions, fetters, defilements. So we get 9 occurrences of greed. So, I mean, this justifies why, or it helps us to see why the Buddha makes craving, another word for greed, the noble truth of the origin of suffering. Then we have wrong view occurs 8 times, because views are very common. And the way I understand it, wrong view originates from ignorance. It's sort of closely connected with ignorance. Ignorance is not understanding. And then because there's lack of understanding, lack of insight, lack of wisdom, then there comes misunderstanding, distorted understanding. And distorted understanding is wrong view. Then there comes delusion, which occurs in 7 cases, everything except under knots and clingings. But delusion or ignorance really underlies everything, even though it's not explicitly mentioned in those categories. So those are the 3 that are most instrumental in what I would say in sustaining the round of birth and death. Those are the driving factors of birth and death. Ignorance at the bottom, and out of ignorance emerging craving or greed and wrong view. But then there's another factor which plays a very dominant role in our mental life, sort of the negative side, which is hatred or aversion. And so that occurs in 5 of these groups. Then doubt, you could see, occurs in 4 as hindrance, a latent disposition, a fetter, and a defilement. Conceit occurs only 3 times, restlessness 3 times, sloth twice, then worry or remorse occurs only as a hindrance, torpor or dullness, or drowsiness occurs only as a hindrance, then lack of shame, lack of moral fear occur only once, envy and miserliness occur only once. These 2 as fetters according to the Abhidhamma method. Okay, and that takes us through the classifications of the unwholesome factors. And you could see how in the suttas, when the Buddha speaks about these different groups, now I'm going to teach you, O monks, the asavas or influxes. There are these 5 fetters that have to be, or these 5 hindrances that have to be overcome. There are these latent tendencies to be eradicated, or beings are bound by 10 fetters, using these different terms, different factors included under them. But when we bring them all together, this is what the distinctive Abhidhamma methodology, and sort of inquire what are they actually referring to, we see that it's a limited cluster of mental factors, unwholesome mental factors, that are operating in these different roles. It's like one person, let's say a movie actor, now he's playing in this drama, he's playing the role of Hamlet. Another drama, he's playing the role of, let's say he's lost his status as a Shakespearean actor. Now he's enrolled to play Superman or Batman. And now he's enrolled in a television series. I don't know what's going on in television. Dr. Kildare, was that a television program? Okay, so he plays different roles, but it's the same guy in these different roles. So according to the nature of the drama or play, he takes on the different roles. Okay, we'll take any questions now that have come up. Do you have a question? You have a question? Please then take the microphone. And okay. Please.
I hope this isn't too simplistic. I was interested in hearing you explain the difference between wrong view and delusion.
I thought I just did, but I'll just repeat what I was saying, that delusion, the word is a little misleading, so I prefer to say maybe mental lack of understanding, lack of mental clarity. So delusion means not understanding things as they really are, lack of clear understanding. Wrong view means that wrong view takes the form of a specific formulation. So, like, there is no merit in practicing giving, or the world is eternal, the world is not eternal. All of those are specific views. They're formulated, they're verbalized, articulated, and then one grasps that and adopts that and clings to it and promotes it. Whereas delusion is ignorance. It means simply like not understanding, particularly not understanding the the Four Noble Truths, the Three Characteristics, dependent origination. Okay, Matt, Victor, Sam, and then we'll have to break for lunch, I hear.
Thank you, Bhante. Now, the last statement in this section says this is the compendium of evil, as stated, and yet it seems that these mental formations are sort of impossible not to fall into until one has right understanding and right view.
Yeah.
So why is it called evil?
I think evil is too, though it's the word that's used in the translation, it's too strong. Maybe you could say the compendium of what is bad. And because this is a verse, so it has to fit the meter. So the word akusala, 4 syllables, whereas evil, papang, is 2 syllables. So you have to fit into, I think it's probably an 8-syllable line. Kile sadasavuto yang navada papasangaho. It's an 8-syllable line, so it has to fit in. Okay, who did I said? Victor? And then Sam, and then we cut for lunch.
Yes, Bhante. And my question's about the table in 270. So were you saying that the mental factors that show up more often are stronger in keeping you in bondage than like the ones that don't show up as much as often? Like, for example, greed is everywhere.
Yeah.
But torpor is there once. So you're saying like greed is a lot stronger in keeping you in bondage than say torpor. Is that?
I would say so, though that it takes on more manifestations.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's more prominent in that role.
But if you free yourself of the first 3, which are show up a lot, would that necessarily mean that you free yourself of everything below that, or no? Is that not
Yeah,
really
because if one frees oneself from
for the
delusion,
first 3, then
delusion
everything
is ignorance, which is the root of everything.
right.
So if ignorance goes, then all of the others
Kind of fall.
fall away with it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Sam, and then we break.
Bhante, one of the stock passages in the sutras is always regard material form or self, or
You have to put the mic close.
regarding form as self, self as possessed of material form, form as in self, and self as in material form. But this is related to the identical owner inside.
The what?
This is related to these identifying qualities, the owner inside encompassing. How is, it seems like there's some correlation between those two.
I'm not understanding.
I asked the question one day in regard to form as in self.
Yeah.
How is that related to owner inside and encompassing as far as...
Okay, form in self.
Right.
Okay, so this is what I call the encompassing view. So the self is what encompasses everything, and form is inside the self. So that is the self as encompassing. Is that what the answer to the question?
But then there's form as in self, but self as in form.
There are 2 different views, kinds of views. As I said, one sees the self almost like very minute, very small, like a little nucleus. This is one of the Brahminic views of the Upanishads. The self is very small, smaller than the smallest. And so then it's lodged within the body, within the heart. Then the other is the self is what is all-embracing and universal, and everything in this world is within the self. Okay, we'll have to stop now, and then we'll continue. We have the meditation at 1:40, and then the next session at 2:10. So we end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. Okay. 1, 2, 3.